This
Thank you
conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Oregon State Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Thursday, June 18th, 2020. This is Marty Myers, Chair of the State Board of Agriculture. I already said it, but this meeting is called to order. Before we begin, I'd like to ask our ODA Board Coordinator, Carla Valnes, to review a couple of housekeeping items before we start the meeting.
Good morning, everyone. Just a reminder to please mute your phones or your computer audio during the meeting to prevent unnecessary background noise. Also, if you are joining the call by video, we're requesting that only board members, ODA board members and presenters use their camera this morning. So others, if you would just turn your cameras off. You will be able to see any screens that we share during the meeting if you are connected via GoToMeeting. Also, if you're connected via GoToMeeting, please do not use the chat function to exchange comments or ask questions. However, we would like you to use the chat box to as our sign-in sheet, so we have a record of who is attending our meeting this morning. Also, if you are joining by phone only, we'll take a moment here and let you introduce yourself so we have a record of people that are on the phone. All of our pre-meeting materials have been posted on the ODA website if you're looking for those materials, or anything that we speak about today will be posted after the meeting. And just for the record, the meeting will be recorded this morning. The audio will be recorded, and we'll post that on our website as well.
Thank you, Carla. Let's move to board member roll call and introductions. I'll begin. Marty Myers, Boardman, Oregon. Carla, you want to go through the roll call?
I will. Barbara Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, Chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Pete.
Pete Brentano, Farm Fisherman, St. Paul.
Stephanie.
Stephanie Halleck, public member, Lake Oswego, Oregon.
Brian.
Brian Harper, farmer, Junction City, Oregon.
Shantae.
Shantae Johnson, farmer, Corbett.
Grant.
Grant Kitamura, onion shipper, Ontario, Oregon, board member.
Sharon Livingston. Tyson.
Tyson Raymond, farmer, Helix, Oregon.
Luisa.
Luisa Santa Maria, public member, Oregon State University Extension.
Director Taylor.
Hi, Alexis Taylor, Director ODA.
Dean Sams.
I'm Alan Sams, Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences at Oregon State, ex officio member.
Okay. Do we have anyone that's on conference call only? If so, please.
Jess Paulson, Market Access and Certification Program Area Director.
Scott Hilchenberg, 1000 Friends of Oregon.
Ann Johnson, Oregon Seed Association.
Okay, I think that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Carla. So welcome, everyone. And we'll move on to the first agenda item here. So if I can manage through this. Okay. I think you've all had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting. Any discussion that we want to have before we make a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you,
Second.
Tyson.
This is Stephanie, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, if none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Motion passes. Minutes are approved. Okay, we'll go to Alexis, Director's Report.
This is Tyson Raymond, really quick. Alexis and Carla, I have a question. When this records, will it say who's speaking, or do we still have to announce our name before we have any comment?
Please announce your name before you speak.
Well, great question, Tyson. Thank you. This is Alexis Taylor for the record. It is great to see all of you again, even if it is just virtually. Obviously, thank you all for flexibility as we try out this new format for a board meeting. I'm sure all of you have been on more Zoom conference calls, FaceTimes than we ever thought we would, and it's a new way of doing business. So thank you all for your willingness and flexibility to still meet like this. So a lot has changed. Our world has changed pretty significantly since the last time that we met. Not just with the coronavirus, COVID-19, and how that's really changed, I think, everyone's life, but also with the additional highlight and conversations around racial justice in the United States. And we will be talking about, I think you will hear some about both of those topics really as we discuss our thinking and prioritization around our LC and POP discussions and budget discussions today. So for my director's report, I'm really just going to roll into the COVID-19 update for the department, because so much of what we have been doing since last we met has been really in response to COVID-19 as an agency. So in the beginning, we were really focused on two things initially, way back in March, which seems about 1 million years ago. One was ODA operations and how could we adapt our work while still continuing to provide critical services to all Oregonians, but in a way that protected our staff. And the second was really focused on ag supply chains and trying to keep them open and moving. So for our staff, I'll start there and then go to the supply chain conversation. As every business, we have moved towards very heavily towards remote work and flexible schedules. So in a normal world pre-COVID, over 50% of ODA's work is in the field. And that could be they have a home office and doing some work out of their home office and inspections in the field. That's a combination of what that might look like. Of the nearly 180 staff who have a regular workstation in the office, whether that be here in Salem at headquarters or in one of our field offices, say in Bend, around 72% are now working remotely or on a modified schedule. Modified schedule is really important in our labs because of that, you can't take that work home. And so we've split shifts to try and limit the number of people in the labs so they can increase that physical distance. But so 72% of our staff are doing that, of the people who are typically in office. For our field staff, we've also made additional changes. So we have focused on high risk and high priority work. So for our food safety inspectors, that is prioritizing high risk firms. We have actually started deploying video conferencing for that initial visit. And we also have been going to, and this is true for all of our field inspection work, going to no surprise visits, 100% inspection visits, and really looking and scheduling at low traffic times in those facilities. One of the high risk categories and firms that we're focused on is grocery stores, right? Obviously, as we think about deploying our staff into areas and still protecting them, thinking about going into grocery stores when there are not a lot of customers there was really a priority. Again, but focusing on a video conference with the store manager to talk about what's different, what concerns they had, has anything changed in their operations, again, to limit our time and exposure for our staff in those facilities. For nursery inspectors, we focused our work on exports which needed phytosanitary certificates. Our CAFO inspectors started limiting, still doing their work. Again, they do that work outside, but limiting interaction with producers. Oftentimes they would share a ride in a vehicle around the farm. They no longer did that. They drive themselves around the farm and maybe call the farmer as they're driving around talking about what's going on at the operation on the phone, as opposed to, again, having that conversation in the car as they drive around. For our invasive species program work, we have, again, doing that focused on the high priority area. We've focused on Japanese beetle, the program there, and then limited the rest of our seasonals that we usually bring in to ODA throughout the summer to hang invasive traps all over the state. That work still is important to get done, so we've taken a different approach to do it. We've sent traps to all ODA staff, particularly those out in the field, and it's part of their normal work as they're driving around from farm to farm, doing their normal work. They're also out hanging invasive traps. I've also been doing this. I have our 3 different traps hung at my home, and as I've gone out and am hiking, I'm hanging traps as well. And so we are trying to do that same work just a little bit differently. Also for ODA, as part of our response to COVID-19, we have been engaged at several different forums at the state level. So there's an emergency command structure. It's called the ECC. ODA has been part of the ECC since the beginning. Part of that is because we are responsible for one of our essential functions in the state under disaster emergency preparedness. So we have several staff who have been rotating through that work throughout COVID and responding to things that come up around food and agriculture as priority areas. Additionally, I serve on what is known as the MAC group. It's a multidisciplinary committee that is co-chaired by the state COO, Katie Koba, and Director Pat Allen of the Oregon Health Authority, where we really prioritize what's going on in the state and our COVID response. I'm there because 2 priority areas is our agricultural workforce and then our food security and food stability. And so I am there because those are priority areas for the state in our response to COVID-19. Also, so I mentioned at the beginning, in the very beginning of COVID, we really focused on 2 priority areas. I talked about ODA's operations response. The other place we really focus is around supply chain and keeping those agricultural supply chains open and moving. A couple areas that we worked on very specific guidance for was around livestock auctions, farmers markets, U-pick operations, on how they could continue to operate in the world as we knew it with COVID-19. We were also focusing on helping the industry as different supply chain challenges opened up and we saw. So some of the things that we saw and have come up to us that we've been also having particularly our marketing staff focus on is, overnight with restaurants and food service, whether they were shutting down or shifting to a takeout model, their supply chains changed pretty drastically. And the agriculture industry that was supplying those, their markets dried up overnight. And so our marketing staff really were looking and having conversations with the agriculture industry on where there was surplus and where there maybe were still demand. A couple of those areas I'd just like to highlight is with our farm to school program. So obviously the many schools were still serving their communities with breakfast and lunches. That's still a need for many children around the state. But what they needed, those schools needed to continue to be able to feed those kids throughout the day, the week, changed. And so we did a call to for maybe more processed, prepackaged food, and our farm to school program was working with the Department of Education and those food processors, those farmers, to try and make some of those linkages. Likewise, we did some work with the Oregon Food Bank. The state committed $8 million to support additional purchasing efforts that the food bank needed to really be able to meet the additional demand that they were seeing in food banks all over the state. Based upon obviously very challenging economic times that many Oregonians are experiencing. And so the state committed $8 million to help with that additional demand that they were seeing. And so we worked with them, in particular our marketing program, on what their priority products were and what they were looking to purchase to get into meet that additional demand, and then where we were seeing surplus and challenges because of supply chain issues and matching those two up. We've also been working with a couple of small industry sectors to try and really highlight local products and that they're still there and still available. Some of you may have seen we launched a new campaign with the our seafood industry, and it's the hashtag Eat Oregon Seafood. We've been partnering with them, and that's going to be an ongoing series where we're partnering with kind of local chefs, talking about different ways to prepare local seafood. The seafood industry, as many others, were hit particularly hard with restaurant closures. We've also been working on with the Oregon Farmers Market Association to create an online marketplace for farmers and producers who are selling at farmers markets, to really be able to help meet the way consumers are now buying food, which is an online model. Many people are wanting it delivered to their car, and so helping build a platform that can help encourage that more online model way of buying food. Over the past 2 months, those are some of the things that we've been focused on from really the beginning. Over the past 2 months, there have been some additional priority topics that I would say, particularly at the senior level, the director's office level, and some of our program director level, we've been spending a lot of our time on. Some priority topics in the food and ag sector have really arisen. And again, this is part of the reason why, again, ODA and myself sits on that MAC group, and that's around food security, food stability, and the workforce protection. So the first is around farm workers. I hope everyone has seen that the state has launched a food security and farm worker safety program. This launched last Wednesday, and it's really a collaborative effort amongst many state agencies, and a different way than what we would normally roll out a program. And part of that is a product of just how quickly we had to be able to stand this up. The governor and the legislative leadership are using $30 million from the Federal CARES Act dollars that the state received to be able to support and help mitigate the spread of COVID-19 amongst our farm worker community as we're going into peak harvest for so many crops. That $30 million is really, I would say, carved out. I think about it into two different buckets. $16 million is to help provide assistance to our agricultural producers to meet the compliance with Oregon OSHA rules, Oregon OSHA temporary rules. At the beginning of May, they released temporary rules on really trying to increase the physical distancing in employer-provided housing and employer-provided transportation, and then increase some additional field sanitation units, so portable restrooms, hand washing stations, right? These are some low-tech things we all are trying to do in our lives to mitigate and reduce the spread of COVID-19, and so Oregon OSHA's rules brought that into Oregon OSHA released temporary rules on May 11th to try to do that as well for our farm worker community. And 16 million of that 30 million is really targeted to help agriculture producers with additional costs to comply with these rules in employer-provided housing, employer-provided transportation, and additional field sanitation needs. The other 14 million is really around mitigation measures. So that includes PPE for our agriculture and farm worker communities. I hope a couple weeks ago we did over a million mask distribution, which would not have been possible without OSU Extension. Thank you, Dean Sams, for that really strong support. We also did 5,000. Part of that was over 5,000 gallons of hand sanitizer to the agriculture and farm worker communities. Also part of that 14 million mitigation measures, there's some outreach and educational dollars that is being run through the Oregon Health Authorities. They have a community-based community partners program where they are developing linguistically and culturally specific outreach materials for particularly the farm worker community. And then we'll be working with those community partners on making sure those resources are getting out to those communities, as well as, targeting efforts on Spanish-speaking television and radio. And then the remaining piece of that mitigation fund is a quarantine fund to really ensure that farm workers, that if they are sick, if they need to quarantine, if they need to recuperate, that the financial burdens and concerns that they have are not a reason why they are not talking to their employer that they may be sick. And so that has been, we stood this program up in a month. So the rules were released on May 11th. We launched the program on June 10th. For those of you who have worked with state government, including ODA, these programs normally, to launch a brand new program, usually takes, 6 months, 9 months, a year. And we were able to do it in 1 month. So that's actually pretty remarkable. We would not have been able to do that without really strong support from so many in our agriculture industry and our stakeholders. We had an uncountable number of conversations with the agriculture sector, with their industry lobbyists, and with farmers and ranchers on the ground themselves. And so it was a really quick time frame for us as state agencies, but also for the industry. And that was a really invaluable partnership to really understand what the highest priority needs from the agriculture sector are, and then how do we prioritize that with these $30 million that was dedicated for this food security and farm worker safety program. One of the things that's pretty unique is just the way the state approached administering this program, again, because of that very quick timeline we were trying to operate under. So we pulled, obviously ODA was very closely involved on the policy side. We're going to continue to stay involved. Oregon Housing and Community Services was involved as really the housing expert in the state and understanding how, housing, how that kind of footprint really looks like in the state. And then we're tapped, Oregon Health Authority was a key partner of the governor's office. And then we really tapped into OWEB's expertise on really running a program like this, right? So their base program is grant model, right, where they're getting receipts from landowners and then being able to do a reimbursement model on that. And so they had an expertise that I think nobody else in state government had, and they had capacity and a willingness to help out. And I'm really thankful for that, because I do not think we would have been able to launch this program in 30 days without without their ability to really be a partner. So I'm very thankful for that. One of the other priority areas that we have been really focused on, as well as in the food processing side, and around some of the COVID positive clusters that we have been seeing within food processing. One of the things that we have been working on, again, with Oregon Health Authority, with Oregon OSHA's consultative branch, and then the local public health, is we have called it a food processor playbook. They've done playbooks for several other areas. The first one really that the state did was around congregate care. So nursing homes, how do you handle and try to manage and mitigate the spread of COVID-19 within congregate care settings? We developed a similar model for food processors. This is really, as I talk about a playbook, it is essentially a roadmap for how the government can have a coordinated response when there is one positive case within a food processor. We've selected one because that's the most protective we could be, right? But also our response is trying to do a risk assessment, understanding the risk of that business, and how can we make sure that they have the resources they need to respond while minimizing the disruption to their operations, right? A vegetable packer goes down because of COVID in the middle of August. If that lasts a couple of weeks, farmers are plowing crops in the field. Dairy processor goes down for a couple days, right? That has huge impacts to those dairy farmers. And that then also trickles down the supply chain, but also up to consumers. And again, our food security and food stability. And so how do we minimize those disruptions while protecting the worker health and doing what we need to on the local public health side as well? So we've created this essential roadmap for the government on how, when an outbreak happens, when there's a positive case in a food processor, how we respond, assessing the risk assessment, and figuring out what additional resources does the county need? Do they need more testing? Those deploying contact tracers, those types of things. In addition to the playbook that we created, we also created this business toolkit. And we've been sharing that with our food processors as well, and really focused on things that the businesses should be doing proactively, thinking about today before they have a positive case, and then how they should be planning for if they get in that instance with a positive case. So it could be things around thinking about shifts, and do they cohort their shifts when maybe their shifts would intermingle before, not allowing that intermingling. And, you know, ODA is a part of this because, one, we have relationships with these food processors, but also we want to make sure whatever changes they're making don't jeopardize food safety. Oregon OSHA, the consultative branch, is a part of this because, again, we want to make sure whatever changes they make don't jeopardize worker safety. And then, obviously, health authority, the Oregon Health Authority and the local public health, because ultimately these are a public health response when there is a positive case or a cohort of positive cases in a food processor. Only one other topic I really want to mention on state response before I can see, well, I've talked quite a while, I'm sorry, to see if there are any questions, but is just around state meat inspection. And this is a topic I know I've talked to some of the board members about, and I just wanted to flag that I know we flagged a letter I had sent a couple weeks ago to, or maybe even a month ago, to USDA on trying to get some flexibility in the Federal Meat Inspection Act. We are seeing, as we've seen some of the larger meat inspection meat packers have to shut down several weeks ago now. They're mostly back up and running because they were also having positive cases of COVID and pretty extensive positive outbreaks of COVID in their facilities. We've seen some market disruption. And Oregon used to have a state meat inspection program. It went away in the 70s. I think there's a renewed interest. And I think there was a renewed interest before COVID-19, but I think that has just highlighted the interest from some in our livestock industry to be able to have more Oregon meat inspection and a state meat inspection plan. So we are working on finalizing a proposal to develop a state meat inspection plan for USDA. I would say it has strong industry support. There's strong support in the legislature. We've seen great support from our congressional delegation. But establishing a state meat inspection plan is a long-term investment for the state. If we want to put it solely on fees, it is a program that will not be able to sustain itself, like we see with other parts of our programs that we administer. And so the state has to be committed to supporting this program long term to really have a viable state meat inspection program. But there's also another side to that, and that's on infrastructure. Facilities will need to make changes to meet USDA inspection standards, and that could be a very costly capital investment. And so I think there is interest in the industry and conversation going on about how do we do a grant program to try and help these smaller, what are custom slaughter facilities today, to make additional infrastructure investments to be able to meet a state meat inspection program standards. And so we are working on that. There was a bill during short session on this. I think this will continue to be a conversation within the legislature, and we will definitely talk more about that on our LC and POP list conversation. And sorry, I took way longer than I thought I was going to, Chair Myers. But if there are any questions, that was a lot of information. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them from the board.
Thank you, Alexis. Obviously, we're all facing this issue and are concerned about all businesses and every one of our state employees that are out in the field, such as ours. Have we had any serious outbreak that we're facing in our workforce?
So we've been very fortunate so far. We have not, and for ODA, but we've been very, very cognizant of where we're putting our staff. How do we adapt? How do we protect them? And so, I think I would say we're fortunate to date that we have not had a serious outbreak or impact to our staff to date.
Good. Any other questions before we move on?
Chair Myers, this is Stephanie Halleck. I have a couple of questions, but they're not related to COVID, so I'll just hold off for a minute and see if anybody has COVID questions.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay. First of all, Director Taylor, I just want to compliment you and the staff for the enormous amount of work on this. It's just incredible, and certainly understand why it took you a long time to talk about all of it. I have two unrelated questions. One, if a staff person who's on could answer me just by email. We have ODA traps in our neighborhood, which is Green Tree neighborhood of Lake Oswego, and if somebody would just send me an email and let me know what they're for, I'd appreciate it. And then secondly, I just wondered if you had any comments on the climate change report that you submitted to the governor, and what it was very comprehensive, and what the next steps on that might be.
So thank you for that. So it depends on the traps. Are they the green traps that you're seeing? This is Alexis Taylor for the record, sorry.
Yes, they are the green traps.
So those are our Asian gypsy moth traps. Is that what you were asking for the
Yes.
test? Yes.
And I don't want to derail this, but I'm curious if they found any.
So we put them out at the beginning of the season, and then we will collect them at the end. So really going into fall, and that's when our entomology lab will look at them and see, and they collect them, they see where they were, and then we see where we have pockets based upon the traps that go out. So I don't believe that we know yet. I will follow up with Dr. Rogg from our plant and conservation program, but we're pretty early in the season to have any kind of data from those. On the climate report, so I know that there were, the governor's office, I think, was getting some comments on all of the various climate reports that were required under the governor's executive order. ODA's was one of them. I don't know the exactly what next steps on for the governor on those, right? They had the reports, they're looking at them. I think as we're thinking about state budgets, which we will talk a little bit about, we're all trying to see how all of this will shake out. Obviously, a lot of many climate reports are around additional budget asks or reprioritization of resources or those types of things. So I'm not quite sure how we don't exactly have direction yet on how that syncs up with the current budget world that we're living in. It's obviously still a priority for the governor. We are also part of that interagency work group that is on natural and working lands that's being stood up under the Oregon Global Warming Commission. I believe that that meeting is actually next week, and so there will be additional conversations, and that was also part of the governor's executive order, and so there will be additional conversations there that ODA will be a part of.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Director Taylor?
No, this is Carla for the record. I have just a quick reminder for those that have joined us after we got started this morning. Please refrain from using the chat box to have conversations with board members or submit questions. We'd like you to use the chat box just to use as a sign-in sheet. So please list your name and your organization as you join the meeting. So just a reminder. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Lisa Hanson and Lauren Henderson are going to update us on the budget.
Good morning, board members. So for the record, Lisa Hanson, Deputy Director with the Department of Agriculture. Lauren is off working on another project this morning, and so Jonathan and I will work you through the budget work that we've been doing, as well as our legislative concept and program option packages. And we also have Andrea Boyer, who is with our budget shop, on the line to bail me out if I get too far too deep and get myself in trouble. So I'm going to start out from kind of the beginning. I've talked about this, and probably several of you have heard it before from me. And so if it's repetitive, I apologize. But I think it's important to kind of get a global perspective of where we're at. So early on in the pandemic, we recognized that we should anticipate revenue issues for the state and likely an economic downturn. And so we had positions that were vacant. We had positions where we had made offers to candidates. We pulled those offers back because from our experience, we knew that we could anticipate budget reductions coming. And the sooner you start saving, the longer you can carry out core services. And so we made some really early adjustments internally to try and prepare for what we thought was coming at us. We also knew that when our economy shut down and bars and other venues that host lottery machines shut down, that there wouldn't be revenue coming in on the lottery side of things. And for your background, if you don't remember, lottery funds a big part of our natural resource programs. Our water quality program has lottery funds. Our noxious weed program has lottery funds. Our insect pest prevention and management program is funded with lottery funds. So a big chunk of that natural resource section has lottery funding. Along with, there are grants that go out through OWEB to our partners on the ground, soil and water conservation districts, and weed control programs that are lottery funds as well. And so those conversations started early on. I think somebody needs to mute. I'm getting feedback. Those conversations started early on.
Just a reminder, if you're not on mute, please do so.
Just press pound or hash. This conference will now be recorded.
All right.
Okay, maybe we have it. And so as the governor's natural resource cabinet as well started talking about the lottery funds. And really on the lottery side, the challenge is this. Lottery funds come in, there are quarterly allotments made to agencies. And so for us, it's a cash flow problem initially, as well as not knowing how much we're going to get. So ultimately, because of the timing, all of the weed grants went out for fiscal year 2020, back right at the beginning of March. So those are on the ground. It's likely we will not see any weed grants going out in 2021 because of revenue reductions, and that would be the OWEB piece. For ODA programs, we received our full distribution in May for this quarter, but we knew that there was a potential that we will not see hardly any distribution in August or November, December timeframe, just depending on how people come back and start playing those machines. And so we had to make some major adjustments in terms of cash flow. There have been varying degrees of trying to anticipate what the reduction in cash flow will be. I think the latest numbers we've talked about is between 30 and 35% of the biennial revenues being reduced. So when I talk about that, if you think about it, we're going to take it all in the second fiscal year of the biennium. And so it's doubled in terms of whatever reduction is there. So we made some pretty major decisions and started making changes early. One of them was we made a decision and worked it through a governor's process to move our weed staff over to do hemp work. We had a package in the 2020 session to bring on a manager for hemp as well as staff. The 2020 session melted and that package didn't move, but we still have the work. In some ways, it may have been a blessing in disguise for us because it allowed us to move the management of that program under an existing manager and move current staff over to do that work and keep them employed in a situation in where if we didn't have revenue, we likely would have been into layoffs. So the weed work that we'll be doing for this summer will be that in which we can do on federal funds. So it's going to be very limited, and we've cut programs, and our weed staff for the most part will be doing hemp work, and they're already into that training because we started that early. The other thing that we did, recognizing we needed significant savings, was we made a decision not to bring back our seasonal trappers in our IPPM program. We were well into the Japanese beetle eradication program, and we have 3 years, I think, investment in the state into that program and felt it was important to complete it. But by making the decision not to bring back the trappers for this 2020 season, it's almost an $800,000 savings to the agency. And so we've looked at alternative ways to get those traps out. It'll be a smaller footprint than what we would have had if we had staff doing it, but working with our staff, as Director Taylor referenced, putting them out, as well as reaching out to other partners, whether it be through the Invasive Species Council, other agencies that have staff out and about on the road. Parks is putting some traps out for us in the places where they do have staff to get that work done. And that is a big chunk of what we've had to do on the lottery fund side initially. I think we're in a holding pattern to know what it's going to look like for the 2021 trapping season for us, Japanese beetle eradication, etc. And so those programs are farther out. We've got some more time, for the next year, but we made early changes to be able to deal with the lottery funds on this side. And I think it's important for me to also mention one of the principles that we used was, as we've looked at reductions and changes and modifications, one, to continue to deliver core services to the best of our ability to maintain staff that are current full-time staff as much as we can within the budget realities that we're in. And so we really have done a lot of adjusting, and the staff have been pretty flexible in terms of trying to change the work that we're doing. So I'm going to pause there on lottery and see if there are any questions, or if Alexis, Andrea, or Jonathan have anything they want to add to that lottery piece of the reductions. No questions? Okay.
Well, Barbara Boyer.
Yeah.
Barbara Boyer has a question. So on the trap, I know our conservation district, Yamhill, and I don't know if this email specifically went to conservation districts or just one of our employees grabbed onto it. I know we volunteered to help put out traps, so I didn't know if maybe all conservation districts were reached out to install traps. And then my other question was, are they reaching out to the commodity commissions to help with something like that?
Barbara, those are great questions. I think I'll tell you, we've learned as we've gone on this. There wasn't a really great outreach plan to try and figure it all out. We've had to kind of do it on the fly as we've gone. I don't know about the commodity commissions, and I will surely follow up with that. And I also don't know if we actually reached out to all of the soil and water conservation districts. I do know that we've worked with the Invasive Species Council, as well as we had a conversation like this with the ag stakeholders, the lobby groups, and the environmental community and the lobbyists there, and brought it up in that meeting and throughout. So if you all are interested, we're going to reach out to you, and if you can put traps out, that would be great. And we did get some cooperators from those conversations as well. But I will specifically follow up on who in that soil and conservation district world, as well as the commodity commissions.
This is Stephanie
Okay,
Halleck.
thank you.
A similar question to Barbara's. Is there a possibility to coordinate with Oregon State Extension on that as well? I really like the fact that state parks helped out.
Thank you for the question, Stephanie. I'll reach out back with Jake Bohart, our program manager there, and make sure he has reached out to Extension. Okay, thank you, and follow up on that as well, so we can continue to work to get those traps out. Thank you.
Lisa, this is Carla. Stephanie Page noted that the information was distributed to all SWCDs.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. All right.
This is Alan Sam, just for the record, OSU Extension would be happy to help. You can get in touch with the usual people, or I can help you get connected.
Thank you, Dean Sam.
Any other questions from the budget items for Lisa?
Okay. So do you want to talk general fund now?
Yes.
That's the first. Lottery funds was the first one. Now let's talk general fund. So on the general fund side of things, there are a couple of ways that general fund reductions can take place during the biennium. One of them is the governor can do an across-the-board allotment reduction, and in ODA's 2021 biennial budget, we have 7 different lottery or general fund allotments. And so it's basically by that general fund line item, by program area, and then there were 3 new programs that came into our agency as a result of the 2019 session. The other way that reductions can be taken would be for the legislature to come in, and they're able to do line item reductions for programs, et cetera, and take more or less. So we've had several different assignments and lots of different discussions over the last probably 8 weeks around reductions and trying to prepare for whatever happens in terms of the general fund shortfall for the current biennium, and then now also we're looking out into future biennia for what that might look like as well. And so again, as we had to work through reductions on the general fund side, we had to put together for the governor's office for consideration an 8.5% reduction for the biennium of our general fund allotments. That ends up being about 17% for the fiscal year 2021. So again, double it, because we really only have now 6.5 months to be able to obtain those savings if people weren't preparing for them. And then the other piece of that, I think, we're still unclear in terms of how big the shortfall is going to be. At one point, we were waiting for the May revenue forecast. I think it wasn't quite as bad as people thought, and that's because we have rainy day savings out there. But the longer term impacts of the COVID situation, I think, are much larger than people may have anticipated as well. And we're still waiting to see how all of that shakes out. But for ODA, we went through and had to propose reductions up to that 8.5% of our biennial budget for general fund. We've provided those to you in terms of, it's a long sheet like this, and with multiple tabs in the spreadsheet. And I'm just going to click through them really quick for you. And I've got to grab my glasses because I can't see the number. In our administration allocation, we put forward two things to consider. And again, we used keeping people employed, core services as our priorities in this. And we used, as much as we could, really vacancy savings, vacant positions, to get us there, and places where we thought we could make adjustments in our programs. So on administration, we have a vacant procurement position, and we are proposing to keep that vacant for the remainder of the biennium, as well as doing a fund shift in our agency, and it'll put a larger burden on our other funded programs, but we actually have a fund balance in place, and we don't believe that'll impact our overhead rate in the near future. In our food safety program area, the list is a little bit longer. We received $600,000 in a program option package through our 2019 budget for our lab services. We had not invested that money yet. And so we have proposed for that to be part of the reductions. Predator control received an additional $200,000 in the 2019 budget that was beyond its current base. We're proposing that $200,000 be one of our reductions, but we maintain the base funding in the predator control program, which is about $400,000-ish for ODA. And there's also an equivalent amount at ODF&W as well. About $41,000 in our shellfish program, and then a fund shift from general fund to federal funds in our animal health program, and that would go on to a grant that we have in place. And so that would be to get us through the biennium on the food safety side of things.
Lisa, this is Stephanie. Just a quick question on the fund shift and the shellfish.
Yep.
What's the other fund that it's being shifted to?
The shellfish fees.
Okay, thank you.
Then Senate Bill 883 was a new program that came to our agency. It was licensing of animal rescue entities. We received a general fund allotment to get that program up and started. We can only take an 8.5% reduction in that, and so it's a very small amount, but it's $26,000-ish out of that program. The same is true. There was additional money for base sampling that came into the shellfish program as a result of House Bill 2574. That's about a $17,000 reduction on that allotment. And then we get to the natural resource program area, which is a little more extensive, and I'll walk you through that. So The Oregon Invasive Species Council received additional funding in the 2019 budget as a result of a lot of work done by Senator Roblin, being really the champion for that. We had early conversations with him, given that was new money that had been allotted to the program and came into the agency, and we said, so we're early, we don't know what's going to happen, should we hold off on expenditures in this area? He said, given everything that's going on with COVID and all of the priorities that are out there, we think that's prudent. And so with that, there is a proposed reduction of $280,000 in general fund to the Invasive Species Council. There is a proposed fund shift of $50,000 to our weed control program that goes on to federal funds. There is a proposed fund shift of our program director in the plant program area from general fund to other funds. That would go on to HAMP of $63,000. There is a proposed fund shift of our office manager in the plant program area from general fund to other funds onto HEMP again. We're proposing a reduction of a half of FTE in our CAFO program, which basically is one person for the second half of the biennium. We've already made that change, and that person has been moved over into a vacant position in our fertilizer program that's other funded, and that was work that we had existing, and it was a new position that came into the agency that needed to be done, and so we've done that work to assure that we had the savings in place. The next one, which is a much larger impact, is the pesticide stewardship program. The proposal is $172,000 in general fund, but because that program has been agreed to be equally funded between general fund and other fund, there would be a corresponding reduction in the other funds expenditures as well. So really it's a double hit of 350-ish, little less than that thousand to the pesticide stewardship program. And so some of that is pulling back potentially some of the grants that we had out there and stopping the work, as well as reducing the lab work that's going on at DEQ, and then eliminating the pesticide pickup programs for the remainder of the biennium. And then finally, a one-time vacancy savings in the natural resource program in terms of a vacant position there of $83,000. That gets us through the general fund side.
Lisa, this is Stephanie again. First of all, just generally, you guys have done a great job figuring this out. I do have and I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question. I have sort of a policy question in terms of the natural resources and looking at the package prioritizations as well. In this case, how were the decisions made with regard to taking this action on the pesticide side of the program as opposed to, say, the water quality side of the program?
So it really was a priority. Water quality has been a very high priority for the agency, for the governor, and so we did what we could to keep as much of the water quality program whole for as long as we could. It's very clear if you look at the combination of reductions that the plant program took a very significant hit this time around, and that's part of it was we were able to move those staff over to other work in the HEMP program and try and come up with some alternative ways to do that work, but really focusing on trying to keep our staff.
I think
here at ODA.
Sorry, I think the other thing, the layer to think about is, and when we think about our pesticide work, our core services is the registration, the enforcement of use of those pesticides. Not saying when we have to put a list together on cuts. We're not saying that PSP is not an important program. It is, but when we get down to what are our core services as an agency in pesticides, it's that enforcement piece. Also, I think important, I just want to make sure the board remembers, we only get about 20% of our budget as general fund. So it's actually a very small amount. And so when you're trying to take essentially a 17% cut for the last year of the biennium, it's really hard. We don't have many programs that actually get general fund to pull from.
Okay, you ready to move on? Does that answer that question? Great, thank you. The next program that took, again, it's a small reduction, was new work that came in through House Bill 2437, the removal fill channel maintenance bill. New program, new position, $21,000. Fortunately, we had vacancy savings there because it took us a little bit to get that person hired. And then finally, our last allotment of general fund is in the marketing program area. And we started out with, we had money set aside to do a director's trade mission this fall. That's not going to happen. So that was the first chunk of money that we put on the list at $63,000. We had some vacancy savings in that program with a vacant trade manager position. We had a one-time fund shift that we're doing with one of our staff people, where they're doing a lot of work on certificates of free sale. Those are paid for with fees, and so we're moving her time over onto that funding, which is other funds. And then there was an allotment of $50,000 for administration of the Farm to School grants that came to us, and we were proposing to do a fund shift there of our staff time. So that gets you through the governor's 8.5% list. We understand that there will be a release of what she is up for discussion, I think is the way to say it, up for discussion on Friday. I think with what we've heard, fund shifts will be a high priority that I would anticipate we will see on that list. I think anything in the administration area, we will likely see on that list as well. I'm trying to think, those are the big ones. Fund shifts, yeah, and S&S, and then any vacancy savings, which really is much of around the principles that we used to build our reduction list and try and continue to maintain those core services on the ground.
So when that list comes out from the governor, we will share that with the board. Obviously, that will be, I believe everyone might know, probably a special session called next week. We can talk more about that, but it's really, that special session is really going to be focused on COVID response and police reform, and so unclear with if these lists, if there's anything additional on the budget components of it. But
yeah, the only other thing we're hearing about special session, I would just add it now. Mm-hmm. We have heard they may talk about the meat inspection program this time around. But other than that, we're hearing, rumor has it, that a budget special session will likely not take place until the end of July. I think for the conversations that we've had here, and for myself, who've been through this a couple of times with several economic downturns during my career, the longer the state waits to make a decision in terms of reductions, the deeper it goes for that second year of the biennium. And so therefore, ODA has chose to make management adjustments to retain those savings earlier rather than later, and in order to try and continue to hold those core services as whole as we possibly can. And that's budget.
So, no other questions, we should just jump right in.
Yep. Okay, so Jonathan's going to go ahead and walk you through legislative concepts, and we'll incorporate many of the POP discussions in that as well.
So
I'll go through, we sent out kind of a table sheet, and that'll be my guide of walking through it. I'll go through the LCs, and then if that LC has an accompanying POP, I'll talk about it right then and there. And then for all the other POPs, Lisa and I will discuss those after we get through the LC list. So starting with the first LC, I guess I'll start off by saying actually we had to submit these on April 15th, and so that's when the deadlines were for our LCs. For the really astute and paying attention folks, you'll notice that LCs 2 and 3 are not on this list. Those numbers are missing, and those were placeholders we put forward for kind of COVID response, just in case between April 15th and June, we found we needed something in statute to change. We did not, and so we actually pulled those LCs back. And so that's why you see those two numbers are not there. So starting on the first one, what we're calling kind of the department modernization statutory cleanup, you'll see that there's two components here. The first one is we were going to strike language that has the principal office tying in Salem. We've actually removed that section of the LC because it didn't fit nicely with the other component, and so we kind of had to make a choice on which one we wanted in there. And so we went with the second one, or the second half of it, which was in our statutes, in our organizing statutes, our what we call program areas now are referred to as divisions and division chiefs. And so we're updating those that language to reflect what the department has used for a very long time, to refer to them as program areas and program area directors. So that'll be pretty much cleaning up that kind of language through the different statutes where they're referenced. And then, so I think what we'll do is I'll go through all the LCs and then we can go to questions around them so we can keep moving. The next one on the list is LC 13. These are agency assigned numbers, so these aren't like actual LC numbers. So just a heads up. The HAMP program, it'll be the same language as House Bill 4072 from the short session that was talked about, and this would get the ODA the authority to adopt the USDA rules and come into compliance with the federal program. It's the same language that was put forward and negotiated around in the 2020 short session, just didn't get past the finish line. The only changes that are being made are kind of around the dates, the effective dates, because obviously the effective dates that were in that bill would not apply to a bill in 2021. And then that one has an accompanying POP to do limitations increase to hire staff that would operate the HEMP program. So that one has an accompanying policy package with it. The next one, moving down to the LC4, is new pesticide applicator license. And what this really is that our pesticide program was really designed and implemented both on the federal framework, but then also really looking at agriculture and forestry work. And over the years, there's been a lot of different categories added to pesticide work. So, school IPM, just applications that aren't directly related to both agriculture and forestry applications of pesticides. And so we're putting forward an ask to create different applicator license types to fit a lot of those different categories into a nicer, kind of more understood and better fitting for both the applicator and for the department, so we can truly reflect the work that those guys are doing versus trying to make it work into like kind of our existing framework.
And if I might add, I think the other piece of it that's important, the current statute requires anyone who's making an application for others to have an applicator license and an operator license, even if they're the same entity. And so we would propose to streamline that for some of these entities like public applicators. If you are a school and you have a single person doing pesticide applications, you would only need to get that applicator license rather than applicator operator. So there's some streamlining in here too to make it a little neater and cleaner and more useful for people.
Yep. So next one is relating to the pesticide certification and training. We have to maintain, basically meet or exceed federal standards for training. The federal government moved the standards, and so we need to adjust our statutes to maintain that meet and exceed requirement. And so that's what this LC would do. We also have a POP to accompany additional fees that would accompany any changes to the training certification program. The next LC is the same as the bill that was introduced in 2020, 4155, and that was the explicit authority for ODA to implement the agricultural channel maintenance bill in a regional approach. And so that was negotiated by the supporters and proponents of the original 2437. And again, it was one that was in the 2020 short session that just didn't make it out. So that one is an as-is language. Then moving down to the food safety and animal health, both kind of as Alexis mentioned earlier on, the state meat inspection program has gotten a lot of renewed interest. We had put the original language from, again, 2020 short session of House Bill 4152, which is Representative David Brocksmith's bill and some others forward. That one, we are getting an understanding that language actually might be part of the special session to give the department the authority to kind of reestablish the state meat inspection program. So if that does go through a special session, obviously this LC then pulled back and taken off. And again, you can see below it, there's an accompanying POP to both Alexis and Lisa's points to do that longer term funding structure for the program. The next LC is veterinarian emergency responders. This came out of, I think, the wildfire incidences, but looking across the landscape of all emergency response, ODA can deputize veterinarians to go out into the field to respond to those kinds of crisis and issues. What we realized is there was no way to both deploy and then also ensure veterinarian technical staff. And so their assistants, we couldn't deploy those guys as well. And so we put forward some language. We realized it created some conflicts in statute. So we've actually, we're working on making that language work for everybody who's involved. And so, but that's the intent of the bill, and we'll work through that. The next one there is LC07, the brands fee increase. This is an increase across the different brand statutes to make that program viable and kind of keeping them funded to moving into the future. And then you'll see, and that one we had some fee numbers there, and so I can go through those in questions, or I can we can share that language through an email as well. But then there's an accompanying POP for that one, so we can accept the additional the fee increases. The next one, 08, is a feeds fee increase. We do not have numbers yet on that, so the LC was kind of blanks, and we'll submit those numbers when when the staff and the stakeholders come to where those levels should be. And then again, we have an additional POP to accept the increase in fees. And then we have a third fee one that follows similar pattern, the food safety fee increase. Over the, I guess it was a couple bienniums ago, the legislature shifted quite a bit of funding from general fund to fee, or to other funds and fees. And so either we're asking for that shift back to general fund, or we're going to have to raise the food safety fees. And again, we left those blank as we're still trying to establish what those would be. And you can see the two pops that accompany that, both one to accept any fee increases, and then a second one to try to do a rebalance there back to general fund. Then the final LC that we have put forward is the Aviation Fuel Quality Assurance LC12, and that one really is focused around more of the regional airports. When our waste and measures folks go out and do all the inspections on the meters, they typically dip fuel tanks to check for impurities and check for water. We don't have explicit authority to actually dip aviation fuel tanks. It's built into the cost, it's built into the service when they go out and do the metering. And so we're trying to get just the explicit authority on the off chance that somebody does challenge why we dipped their tank and we found water or other impurities. And again, it's really focused on the regional guys, the big port, the Port of Portland, Hillsborough. They do this on a routine basis, and so this is kind of those smaller regional airports that this would really take effect. So with that, I think we can take some questions maybe around the LCs before we move to the other POP list.
Yep. So this is Stephanie Halleck, and you guys know, of course, that I'm going to have questions on this stuff because I love it. So my first question is, well, actually, it's a request, and I assume you're planning on doing this now that you have the POP numbers, which are on the other handout that Carla sent. If you'd add them to this spreadsheet, that would be nice. I don't know if anybody else cares about seeing them, but I'd like to see that with the the package numbers added.
Sure.
And I guess these are a couple of general philosophical questions, and you can answer them whenever in this presentation it's appropriate. One is, and also at some point, I presume you're going to have a chart that's going to show the fund type request that goes along with this. So my policy question is, how realistic is it to be asking for anything in general fund or lottery fund, given the previous presentation that Lisa just gave? And so that's one question you can table and answer whenever. And then related to that is, and your prioritization of POPs, which is on the other handout, don't you de facto have to, and I don't think it reflects that, I'd have to do a cross-reference, have the POPs that are related to your legislative concepts be of a higher priority than others, or vice versa? So just philosophically, how does the priority of the POPs that are related to legislative concepts, how do you figure that, the balance of that between all the other POPs, and there's lots of them that you guys have. So maybe when you get to the POPs, you could address that. And I think that's all I have. I may have more when we get to the POPs themselves, but thanks.
So let's go ahead and we'll switch to, or I think if you switch to this list, and then we can talk about philosophies maybe.
Okay, so then before we jump to that list, I want to do a time check. We're past time for break, Chair Myers. Do you just want us to continue on and take a break when we're done with this presentation? I just want to confirm that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Public comment should be condensed anyway. So
perfect. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. I hadn't looked at the time check part. So yesterday, Carla sent out to you a draft list that is our 2021-23 program option list. I'm going to start out by saying much of this was developed pre-COVID, and we had a really aggressive POP list going in around many different priorities. Water quality being one of them, with some expansion of work around SIAs and other things. Additional work related to climate is incorporated into this list. etc. We recognize that it's still a very aggressive list, and we chose to leave it an aggressive list, fully recognizing that I think it's unlikely we're going to see a lot of it. But where we have requests that could fit into priorities or potentially be captured in some of the federal COVID money, I think we don't want to limit ourselves yet. And so that's why the list is as long as it is, from my perspective.
Yeah. And so far, that's been the state's instructions as well. CFO has said, keep bringing them forward. The budget reality is what it is, but they also want to see that full landscape. And we were well in flight into development of all of this prior to our whole world changing.
And I think historically, ODA has been very conservative in terms of our ask, and from the perspective of making it known what we really may need to meet some of the current expectations of agencies, and our agency specifically. We thought it was important to continue to put forward the entire list that you see. I think there were questions about, so how did you come to the priorities that you have and the way that they're listed? There are several principles, again, that we use. First of all, we always go back to our prioritized program list. And many of you have seen it multiple times, and if you haven't seen it, shoot me an email and we can send it out to the entire board again, so you all can look at it. But food safety has been our first priority of this agency for some time. And so you see that reflected in almost any time that we have a food safety ask, it's at the top of the list, and it is here again. I think what you see in like the next several items, as we were prioritizing it, I'll just tell you, we were in the heat of COVID response. And I think we've found some places where we see really strong need in our agency, i.e. number 3, the emergency management coordinator. We don't have an emergency management coordinator specifically here. We've used part of one of our state vet's time. He's a district veterinarian, I think is the appropriate title, as well as we've pulled out of a couple other programs for backup for him. And the demands of being a member of the ECC, I think, are maybe more than we ever anticipated, and now we've experienced it. And as we look forward to, the potential for other emergency management responses, we think it's important that we have resources there because we aren't very deep here in the agency. Then you'll see Japanese beetle, and you'll say, why? And I'll tell you, it's because we have 3 years of significant investment into this program, and if we pull up now, we question what we've done with that funding to date, and so it really is a need to bring that work to completion. And so it continues to stay of high priority on our POPs list. You've got several of the next, it's like the next 3, 4, worker protection, agency equity officer, the pesticide certification training, and internal auditor. The worker protection and the pesticide certification, I think, really reflect additional work in ensuring that pesticide users are adequately trained to maintain safety. And I think that really has moved up our list as we've worked through some of the farm worker issues, especially during the COVID event and working with some of the advocacy groups. And so it moved into a higher place than it might have been 2 years ago, but it's really about keeping people safe. The equity officer has been on our list for a while, high priority for the governor, high priority for the director, and frankly, given recent events and a lot that's happened, it has really, I think, changed the way that we all are thinking about what we need to do as a society related to equity. And so putting strong focus on that, making sure that we have the resources and the training and the knowledge and are self-aware, frankly, in terms of creating a really inclusive workforce and putting that equity lens on the work that we do. Internal auditor, this one's been on our list several times. You all may remember it. It's a law. We're supposed to have an internal auditor. We can't get it funded. It just perpetually comes back, and we need to ask for it so that we have done our due diligence in trying to meet that requirement. You get down to priority 10, lab services staffing. We continue to see more pressure on our agency in terms of the scientific needs here. I think hemp and marijuana and the potential testing and the work that we've done continues to put additional pressures on our lab. And I know that Lauren Henderson has been in discussions with OLCC about us doing some additional testing around recreational marijuana. And if that should happen, it would need additional resources in the laboratory. Number 11, I don't know if we've talked to you all about this much, but as we've been doing work, again, related to the COVID response, and then trying to do more work across program areas with staff and using staff in different programs, we're recognizing a need to have a classification of people that we can easily move between programs. So whether they're doing shipping point work and then they move into doing brand inspection work and then they go out and set traps or do work on grasshopper eradication, we don't have a classification that crosses over that can work in all of those program areas. And we think that that's important for us in terms of being a more nimble organization and managing to the type of work that we have coming at us with more ease. It seems in the world of trying to make things work, this would be a simple thing to do. It's not. And so this is our attempt to work with DAS to create a new classification, but when we need to create a new classification, then we have to deal with it on the budget side, and that gets really complicated as well as with the new state HR system. And so there's a lot of complications here, but it's the right thing to do in terms of providing efficiencies in the agencies and providing services to the public and to our ag stakeholders. You've heard a lot about meat inspection. I think I won't say any more about it. It just continues to rise to the top. And I think when we put it together in 12 and 13 with the domestic market development, they fit nicely in terms of food stability and economic maintenance here for our agricultural sector. The ag development piece is really focused on domestic marketing and making sure that we're placing Oregon value-added products into markets where there's opportunity. Currently, the funding for us to do work at trade shows and other events comes from USDA market access funds, and those are specifically focused on international markets. We don't have a funding source to do that type of work domestically. And so this is really our ask. How do we do more domestic and local marketing, and can we capture some dollars to be able to do that beyond just having the staff? You may have noticed that our staff have worked on very little dollars really to create a seafood marketing initiative that's out there. They've done that in response to doing something to help a really hard hit sector during COVID. This is a means of being able to do that in a broader brush across more of Oregon agriculture. Then 14, 15, 16, these are other funds fee increases. We grouped them together. I think there's really less pressure in terms of state budget dollars, Stephanie here. And so knowing that it's other funded and fee for service, yes, it's important to maintaining the core services, but I think it's much less controversial than those priorities above it that would rely on more state dollars, general fund specifically. And this is hard to see, and I'll tell you this was hard when we prioritized it, and when we first shared the list with Alexis and she saw where water quality had ended up, she said, "Ooh, that ought to have been hard for you, Lisa." And I said, "Yep, it was." But again, trying to focus on those needs of the responses that we're in and maintaining core programs, growing the programs in natural resources. I would say today, as we have prioritized this, our focus is on maintaining what we have and really trying to focus that work into the core regulatory responsibilities of implementation in the Ag Water Quality Program. And so that's how this group, and I think it's a group of about 5 or 6 different POPs that are there together. It was either about enhancing the water quality program, doing some additional work related to climate and the governor's climate initiative. There's some work in there to continue the monitoring in Klamath, which we received funding for in 2019. And then also around some soil work that we've seen. There are many soil initiatives going on out there as it relates to climate and water quality, and back when budget was really good, this was one of those areas that we thought really could enhance what we do here at ODA. The next group is a group related to our plant programs, and several of them you've seen before. We asked for an aquatic position last biennium. It's on the list again. We've asked for additional money for the threatened plant, endangered plant program. It's on here again. Number 24 is really about trying to capture some of the dollars from OLCC to help offset the costs of working in all things cannabis here at ODA, and whether that be some lab costs or the additional pressures that have been put on our pesticide program. That would be what POP number 24 is about.
And the board might remember that we had a budget note in our last budget to do just exactly this work with OLCC around what additional resources based upon the additional cannabis workload we have. So this is in response to that budget note. 25 is really a housekeeping issue that seemed important to bring forward. Our CAFO program does not have adequate S&S, services and supplies, dollars or limitation for what they do. And they're stealing from other programs, i.e. the water quality program, and it seems like it's time to bring that forward and hopefully try and get it addressed, or at least make it known that they're more linked up, and it limits what we do in another program to be able to finish the functions in our CAFO program. Our animal health lab, I think this is really about a discussion opener around what the services we supply there are or aren't. It's expensive. We are having a hard time in terms of just the funding piece of this program on the general fund side of things. And it also incorporates into the discussions that we're having around potentially the North Valley complex and a more unified laboratory system in one place. And so I think it will be a discussion opener for people as much as anything. You have like 3 POPs together in 27, 28, and 29 that are federal funds limitation and ask. I wouldn't expect those are controversial as long as the dollars are there for them. 30 is our HEMP program and getting it right-sized in terms of resources and limitation. We don't have adequate limitation to carry out the functions for the HEMP program. We're anticipating we will see that fixed either in a special session for the current biennium or in a budget package adjustment during the 2021 session. But we need to have a package there to keep that forward because we're receiving cash on the hemp side, but we don't have the limitation to expend it currently. And then the last couple, 31 is a right sizing of a position in terms of fund types. And then the last 2 are housekeeping. So I'm going to stop there.
So this is Stephanie. Obviously, I will have questions, but before I do, I'll, Mr. Chair, see if other people have questions.
Any questions of Lisa?
I have a question. This is Tyson. There's a bit of a poor connection here, so I'm not sure if people can hear me, but is there a reason that we don't tie some of these fees that fund the programs, tie them to the cost of the programs? So whether it's a COLA adjustment or some kind of annual adjustment, so they increase commensurate with the cost of implementing the program.
Not hear you. Okay. So that is a great question. On the general fund lottery fund side, we typically will see some inflation built into our budgets. In terms of the other fund programs, where there are statutory caps rather than just cost recovery, we have to go in and ask for a change in the statute, or in some places, Tyson, we do have statutory authority to do an inflation adjustment each year or each biennium. It's in a couple of the programs that we've done that, but it's not everywhere across the board. And I think in some cases, what has been put in statute for an inflation adjustment is not adequate because it's a specific percentage. And when you see salaries and other things jump more, we just can't, they don't keep up with the actual costs. So there's a mix of things that are happening with it.
So, Mr. Chair, should I proceed with my questions? First of all,
this is Barbara. I have a question when Stephanie's done.
Well, do you want to go ahead, Barbara?
Okay.
Because I have more than one.
Barbara Boyer. So, Lisa, you talked about the CAFO program and the S&S taking from other programs, and you specifically mentioned water quality. Can you give me an example?
So think about travel expenses, or I think another good one probably is DOJ expenses. If they don't have adequate funding in the CAFO program for services and supplies, so DOJ, Department of Justice expenses would be one of those, we have to have money and limitation to be able to pay those bills that are incurred. And so if it's not in that program, we pay for it within another program in that program area.
So
and so
in the natural resource bucket.
Yes. And we have used over time some of the cash and limitation in water quality for services and supplies to help take care of the CAFO program.
And again, because, and I think we've done that historically from the water quality program, because there is a water quality nexus in the CAFO program. So it was the most logical place within that natural resource portfolio, because it's limited to those programs to pull from. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that tie-in.
Okay, Mr. Chair, this is Stephanie.
Okay, go for it, Stephanie.
First of all, as a policy question, as a follow-up, or not a question, a comment, a follow-up to what Tyson said, and nobody has to comment on it. Given what's going on in the world, it seems like the state should have a policy discussion and maybe a legislative strategy to have some kind of an over-the-board policy with regard to inflationary aspects of fees in general. So because it's true across, everybody has to go back and negotiate every fee for every interest group in the legislature. And we have a new world here with general fund and lottery, and it seems to me that there ought to be some ability to have some kind of across the board increased discussion, but that's just my editorial opinion on that subject, unless Director Taylor cares to say anything about it. And again, I just have an administrative request that I don't know what your final list is going to be, but that you have show the legislative concepts on this list, just as I asked you to show the POPs on the other list, and also the fund type on whatever list, just so we can track that. And actually, Lisa, I am curious about package 070. Just briefly, what is that placeholder that refers to revenue shortfalls? Just can you give a brief what the idea is?
So I think I need Andrea Boyer to speak up, because this is like one of those budget technical questions more than policy related. So Andrea, can you help me?
Yes, good morning, everyone. This is Andrea Boyer. So I am the financial services manager. So part of my team is the agency's budget shop. So 070 is sort of a budget technical aspect of our development process. We're required by our budget instructions that it's by policy area. So for example, food safety policy area. As we build our budget, if it looks like for other funds, there would not be enough cash to support the expenditures in the budget, along with a 3-month operating reserve, we're required to put in a package 070 to reduce expenditures to be able to be supported by available revenue. Then we could add a POP in that would add back whatever was cut. So it's typically used with a fee increase. So for example, the brand inspection program, you might see an 070 cutting the program by X number of dollars, and then the POP with the fee increase would add back whatever was cut, assuming we get the fee increase. The idea being if the legislature did not approve an increase, then the program would take those cuts so that we would have cash to support our expenditures. And let me know if you have questions.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And really, I don't have very many more. I'm curious if you know what your classification is going to be for your general inspectors, which I think is a great idea, by the way.
So no, I don't know yet. We're trying to figure it out, and we're likely creating a new classification for them, and that's again another one of the challenges of this. It doesn't necessarily fit neatly into the natural resource classification, Stephanie, and so we've been having some of those discussions, our HR to DAS HR, to try and figure it out.
You probably talked to other agencies, and of course I think of DEQ, because I remember when we went years ago, we went through sort of a similar effort, and I can't remember which NRS classification we ended with, but anyway, I was just curious. And then just with regard to the how these priorities were set, is it a fair assessment to say that it was a combination of policy decisions and practicality?
That is a very fair assessment.
And just so you know, Lisa did the bulk of the work initially on this with Andrea and pulling these priority lists together. They brought it to me, then we brought it to our entire exec team to talk through, so they could then help us as we were talking about prioritization of programs within the agency. It's not just one person who comes up with this. We try to do this as a collaborative effort with the kind of the leadership of the agency as well.
And I guess with regard to that, just one follow-up question about the packages related to legislative concepts, because it is sort of distributed throughout here. And I remember from a timing perspective, will you get a decision on what legislative concepts can go forward in time to adjust your package priorities, or is that all happening at the same time?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Stephanie, so the governor's office has approved all of our LCs to go forward.
Okay.
So they are in the drafting stage currently.
Okay. Okay, well, I don't have anything more for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, for your patience. And thank you, by the way, to the staff and especially Lisa. You always do a really dynamite job of explaining this stuff.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. No other questions or comments regarding legislative actions? Okay. All right. Public comment. There were 2 public comments that we received prior to the meeting. They're written. I think the first one is on the Helvetia area, and they're asking for comments from the Board of Ag or the Department of Ag, and among other agencies. The second one is a comment on our solar resolution. So if there's any other public comments that for people on the line, we're asking that you provide written comments during these times when we're having meetings over the internet, so virtual meetings. With that, I suggest we take a break for 5 minutes. We're a little bit behind schedule here, and come back at let's just say 10:24. Okay, let's reconvene if we could. This is Chair Myers again. We'll go to agenda item number 6 and have a discussion on the 2021 Board of Agriculture Industry Report.
Good morning, this is Carla. I'll kick us off here. We had started our conversation at our February meeting about the 2021 legislative report from the board that's due, and talked about the timeline of a report. The timeline, it needs to be completed by December of this year for distribution in January of 2021. So right now, between June and September, we want to work on the content development of the report, and that will allow us some time to work on a draft and get that out to you for your review in the interim. And then we hope to make a decision early December on final edits to the material so we can get it out to print and ready for distribution in January. I did send out a quick survey to you about what you'd like to see in the report. Not many of you had a chance to do the survey, but we have some good ideas about sections of the report that you would like to include about the state board, and we will incorporate. There was a suggestion to combine a couple of the sections that we had in the 2019 report. 2019 report, and we can do that to condense some space. I've updated the regional facts and economic impact information that we have by region using the 2017 census data, so we'll include that in the report as well. And I think one of the important parts of the report, it's all important, but are the key issue statements that we want to include in the report, and the ranking for those that, based on what we had included last year, water is still very important. Agriculture workforce was number 2, market access, ag land use, and coexistence. We also had a suggestion to highlight maybe a couple of the resolutions that we had done over the past year, and highlight those, and also to add a section of the report certainly on the impact of the COVID pandemic that's faced our industry. So I guess what we would like to talk about today is how we want to move forward on those key industry summaries, or not key industry, but the key issues summaries to be added, and then we can move forward with that. So do we want to set up subcommittees to work on that? Do you want the department to draft some information on it for your review? How would you like to move forward?
Carla, this is Stephanie. How did we do it before?
For 2019, I think I drafted some information for your review, since we had gone from that larger booklet format in the 2017 report down to the brochure style report, and our quarterly newsletters is how we implemented that change. So we can do it the same way, or we can assign some categories or topics to board members to draft, and then we can go from there. So it's up to you.
So on the topics that were included before, I think or if I heard you correctly, everything was included before except for COVID. And so I'm assuming that it would be updates to those program areas and then something brand new for COVID, which I just personally think that the director is, or your office is better equipped to draft than we are, because given everything that Alexis reported on, there's a lot going on. But on the other topics, it would be an update of current activities in those same program areas that we highlighted before. Is that right?
So this is Alexis. It's not so, this report, just to remind the board, is not so much about ODA, it's about the industry in Oregon. And so it's the board's report, and it's directly in response to statute reporting to the legislature. Again, that's the primary audience. However, I think just the public in general also, it's a useful tool for the public in general. So I think it's more about the priorities from the board's perspective for the agricultural industry on what they're experiencing and dealing with currently. And so I think absolutely likely you probably want to include something about COVID and the impacts that we're seeing to the industry. We can certainly help draft something for the board to review. That's no problem. But again, it's more about those topic priority areas from the board's perspective for the agriculture industry and what's going on, and to make sure you're raising those topic priority areas to the legislature, but also to the public generally writ large.
And again,
this is Barbara Boyer. So Carla, how do you think it worked last year? I mean, would you want assistance from the board?
yes, that would be, I think that would be great, because we want it to reflect, you know, the industry's point of view, and, you know, share that with the board, and because it is your report on the status of the industry. So yes, I would welcome any assistance.
And one way, just I'm trying to think about cognizant of everyone's time, and that's why we tried to do the survey to get direct input on priority topics or other things that you would like to see. And so we could certainly resend that out. That is one way we would welcome a feedback from the board who maybe did not have, from the board members who maybe didn't have time to fill that out.
So this is Barbara Boyer. Oops, I'm one of those board members that didn't fill it out. So could you please resend it, Carla?
Yes, I'll redistribute the survey. It was just a quick 4 or 5 questions to help prioritize the categories, or to get additional topics that you would like to see in the report for 2021.
So, Carla, it's always good to have a timeline. Should we set a due date for those surveys so that you can move on?
Yes, I will send it out today, and let's have it in by next Friday, which would be the 26th. So I'll give you a week to do your survey. That would be great.
Good.
So we'll really appreciate the board prioritizing that survey. We'll take a look as well and make sure there are no additional questions we want to add, just to try to gain a little bit additional feedback. But I think it was pretty covered kind of what we were looking for from the board, at least initially. We will probably keep a similar format to the one that condensed version. Again, we'll have, those facts and figures about what Oregon ag looks like. I know we got some feedback at the last board meeting on bringing additional information, particularly around additional racial diversity. So we'll do that. And then we will work up a draft essentially based upon the priority topics the board would like to see covered, and then share that with the board so we can certainly take your edits and changes and additions to that as well. Does that sound like a good path forward for all board members?
Very good.
Yes, Alexis, this is Barbara.
Go ahead, Barbara.
No, I said yes, that sounds good.
Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm.
So this is Stephanie. That I guess the record doesn't reflect the thumbs up, right? You have to say something. So yes.
This is Tyson Raymond. Thumbs up.
Yeah, this is Luisa. Me too.
This is Grant Kittamura. Thumbs up.
Shantae Johnson, thumbs up.
Yep, thumbs up from Brian Harper.
And thumbs up from Marty.
And I won't be here to help. Sorry.
You could make other recommendations now, Pete, and really cause some chaos.
I could, but I won't.
All right. Do you have what we need, Carla, on this topic?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda 7. So we'll start with OWEB report.
Hi there, Barbara Boyer. We had our OWEB meeting last week. And of course, it was mostly around the budget, but also approving some grants that had come through. I think our board packet was, I'm looking at it right now, probably 300 pages. And OWEB is a small agency of 36 employees, and because of the lottery dollar funding and the projection moving forward, they are laying off 11 employees. But with this new funding, the federal through COVID-19 on the food security and farm worker safety update, and OWEB being the grant administrator, they have moved 5 of those 11 to this particular program. So it was very good news that 5 of them could move to that program. And moving forward, we had some decisions to make as a board about funding for the grant. And we chose to take a more nuanced approach to the next biennium. And we estimated how much some of the largest of our funding pool is the Focused Investment Partnership. And we had to estimate how much they were likely to spend before December in the project grant. And have provided that funding. The OWEB did put that funding in their spending plan. Funding for these projects will more likely not to occur before spring, and they will be provided next biennium. And what this did for our budget is it leaves approximately $4.7 million available for future open solicitation grants. You know, it was thrown out there that we should just spend it all now and have nothing the next biennium, and the board was really not comfortable with that. So that was mostly the topic of our conversations. It was a 6-hour meeting. So that was mainly our conversation, and then approving some grants that had come through that were already in the spending plan. And I think that is all I have to report.
All right. Any questions on that report from other board members? All right, we'll move on to our favorite board resolutions. Again, we've got this split into two work groups. So is Stephanie Page on the line?
Let me comment, if you will, Marty. This is Carla.
Okay. All right.
On the resolution packet that was distributed, as you may recall, we were going to continue the review of resolutions here at our June meeting. With all of the work that's been done and the COVID situation, we have decided to extend that work until September. So there's no active resolution work to do today. We have posted the resolutions that are still open for review with the requested edits from the February meeting of adding background statements to those resolutions that did not have background statements. And so we're going to hold those, I believe there's 7 resolutions open until September to allow for additional review and public comment. So we're asking for written comments to be submitted to me by September 17th so we can distribute those prior to our September meeting for review and discussion. So today it's just a notice that we are extending that out to September.
Okay, so as I understand the process then, Carla, we would review the comments and modify if we deem necessary to address those comments and then vote on them in the December meeting?
No, I think we can, with our new procedures, we can choose to take action in September if they're minor edits or we want to approve them, or you could hold them open to for further review and edits and vote on them in December.
So it's based upon what type of comments we get.
Correct.
Very good.
So Carla, this is Stephanie. Related to the comments, I just want to be sure on the 2 that we got today during public comment, one clearly applied to, or they commenter said that it applied to resolution 310, which is the agritourism siting. The one that was by email from Elizabeth Lindsay, can you clarify which resolution? I'm so blind, I can't read it on my screen. Which resolution? Couldn't tell if she was commenting on the climate change one or on solar in general, or if it pertains. She refers to this resolution, but I'm not sure what resolution she's commenting on.
She was making a comment on the solar siting resolution. It's not open for public comment right at this time. She was wanting to provide comments to the board about her review of that resolution.
And then just again, maybe I'm reiterating what Marty just asked, but on the June 8th attachment that you provided and the resolutions that are listed there, those are the ones that are open for comment. And when does comment close on those?
I've asked for written comments to be submitted by September 17th.
Okay, and then we can take action on them at our September meeting, right?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
This is Pete Rentano, Marty.
Yes.
If I may just leave an opinion, since I won't be at the next meeting, on resolution 310. I think that resolution needs to stay essentially the same as it is. There may be some minor tweaks that come in, but in my opinion, it doesn't do anything to exclude agritourism. It just makes sure that there are checks in place that make sure that agritourism is cited appropriately, that it doesn't have ill effects on the surrounding agriculture.
So This is Stephanie. Pete, could I ask a clarifying question since I worked on that one? The only real change, and I just want to be sure you'd be okay with that, that was proposed in the new draft was adding the language about the Oregon Court of Appeals decision in Friends of Yamhill County versus Yamhill County. Are you okay with just having that clarifying point added?
Yes, I am. I just know that we got a ton of public comment on this, and I just wanted to leave my opinion for the record on essentially, I believe this covers what I feel is essential for agriculture to coexist.
Thank you for that, Pete. Appreciate it. Okay, any other comments on resolutions? All right, I'll move on to the nominating committee. The nominating committee did meet. It was about a month ago. I can't remember the exact day, but Barbara, Tyson, and I met, and we have two recommendations for transition in September. We're recommending Stephanie Halleck as new board chair, and we're recommending Brian Harper as vice chair.
It's a good thing we're all muted so nobody can hear the collective groans.
Tyson Raymond, I don't know if I was supposed to call and let Brian know that's what we decided. So if I was supposed to, I apologize, but congratulations, Brian. I second the nomination.
Thank you all.
Okay.
I look forward to working with Brian.
Well, we have to vote on it first, Stephanie.
Oh, well, thank you for the nomination.
All right, we've got a resolution and a second. So any other discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Whew. You made it, Stephanie. Congratulations, Stephanie, and congratulations, Brian.
Thank
This
you.
is Barbara Boyer. Marty, I just want to thank you for your past year of service as chair. You did a great job.
Well, I appreciate that very much, Barbara. And it sure made it easier with virtual meetings. So, all right, moving on. Newsletter topics.
Well, I presume this is Stephanie. I presume COVID all the time. Maybe something about potential budget impacts and program impacts on ODA. Seems people would care about that. However, you do that politically correctly.
I agree on the budget impacts. I think would be, this is Barbara, sorry. The budget impact with COVID, I think would be an interesting point to make.
So this is Alexis. Oh,
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I think on the budget, right, we with the announcement Lisa mentioned with the governor coming out tomorrow with her the proposed the allocation cuts. I think we'll have a little bit more that we can add from where we are and what we know today, but we will definitely talk about the budget, but it might be a little bit different than our conversation today just to be more timely based upon when we get the report done, if that's all right with the board.
This is Grant. I think it deserves to be mentioned about the distribution of the masks and the whatever that stuff is, the hand cleaner, the alcohol cleaner. I think that's important. Thank you.
Well, and highlighting this is Barbara, and highlighting the partnership with OSU Extension. It was such a success here in Yamhill County. It was really amazing to witness.
Yeah, this is Alan. Alexis, I would encourage whatever newsletter coverage is done, gives as much coverage to the great things that you just covered that ODA has done. You know, you had a long list of things. That coverage in the newsletter hopefully isn't going to be all just focused on what you're not going to do or haven't been able to do because of budget cutting and quarantining, all this kind of stuff. You know, I mean, let's celebrate some of the great stuff that ODA has done during this really challenging time to help the state. I think you got a great story to tell.
This is Stephanie. Can't remember if we typically note transitions, but we might want to note the transition in officers, and I don't know if we want to note the Pete and Sharon moving off the board, and that you're looking for new members, and Marty stepping down as chair, and me and Brian, whatever. That might be something to include. Are we going to sing to Pete?
Maybe not sing, but those are all great suggestions. I think we will get to work on that. Thank you for all the board's thoughts, and Alan, thank you for your comments. I appreciate that, and I think our team at ODA will appreciate that a lot, because it's obviously has been a challenging time for everyone, and certainly our folks here at ODA are no exception. So thank you. Any other last newsletter comment topics we want to make sure we include? Otherwise, I have one other thing, Chair Myers. Two other things.
Yeah, I don't know, Tyson Raymond here. We haven't really discussed it, but we haven't really had a meeting. But any numbers regarding just the ag dollars in Oregon and how COVID has affected them? I mean, we haven't gone over any of it. I don't know what any of them are. I don't know if you guys have them readily available, but like if our exports out of the state are down, if our imports into the state are down, just some dollar values that we can place on the state of agriculture over the last 6 months, so people have an understanding of what it's doing financially to the industry.
So there's a lag in all the data that we have. So we don't have any hard figures yet on that. We absolutely will, and we will make sure that is built into, we'll see what we might have by the September board meeting or the December board meeting, and bring those to the board as those start coming in. But we do not, what we have right now is really just anecdotal stories from different parts of the sector on the impact.
Well, there's lots of those stories.
And again, Marty, Tyson Raymond, one more time. And also, I don't live in Portland. I don't know how like the farmers markets and any of that works, and we don't have one out here. So maybe highlight how, I think I read, how some of those places are doing. They're just walking stuff out to people's cars, but maybe like some of the ingenuity that some of the smaller farmers have found, some of the direct to consumer stuff, how they're doing it safely and efficiently to keep some of the smaller outfits going, I think be a positive and kind of cool. I'd be interested in it.
This is Sharon Livingston. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sharon, we can.
I would just like to say one thing. Tyson, thank you. My late son Clayton said you were a smart guy and that you were really interested in agriculture. And I have now listened to an extremely executive, apparent comment, and thank you. We need to keep focusing on the fact that agriculture is the production of food, and our job is to support that. So thank you. Your comment is well taken, and I certainly hope that that gets into the newsletter. Thank you very much, Tyson.
Thanks for the compliment, Sharon, and you're welcome.
Very good. Okay, Alexis, you got a couple other items?
I do, yes, thank you. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to Chair Myers for his year as chairman. We appreciate your leadership. We appreciate your leadership through this very uncertain time and new use of technology for board meetings. So thank you so much for your commitment as a board chair. You will be not missed because you're staying on the board. And congratulations to incoming chair Halleck and Vice Chair Harper. We look forward to the board under your tenure there. The only other thing I wanted to just mention, obviously this is a little bit of an unceremonious way for two board members to go off, but such is the new world that we live in. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much to both Pete and Sharon for years of service to the board. It has been invaluable to me as I came into this agency. Pete was actually on the interview panel when I first came out to interview for this job, and I just can't thank you enough for your service, for your dedication, and for your leadership in helping the Department of Ag really navigate both good times and bad, and certainly navigate some of the biggest amounts of uncertainty that I think probably we've ever experienced here as an agency. And so while that is, we don't have our normal mode of operation, we have a couple things that we just want to do to send you off. First, we will mail these out, but we have gotten plaques made thanking you and just commemorating your service. I'm sorry, Sharon, you can't see this, but we will mail it to you so you have that. And then second, we have a short video we want to play for everyone. So Carla is going to share her screen, if you will bear with us for a moment.
For giving the Board of Agriculture 8 years of service. It has been invaluable as the department has continued to progress in our work. So thank you so much. You will be both greatly missed.
Hi, Sharon and Pete. Just wanted to thank both of you for your time on the Board of Agriculture and your service, for taking time away from your businesses and your families, and for all the thoughtful advice and perspective that you've provided to ODA, our stakeholders, and our customers over the past 8 years. I'm sure we will continue to reach out to you after your service has concluded to continue to get your advice. So this isn't goodbye, but just a thank you. I look forward to seeing you again in the future. And between now and whenever we see each other again, want to wish you both well.
Pete, thank you for your service to the State Board of Agriculture. We're going to miss you.
Sharon and Pete, I enjoyed serving on the Board of Agriculture with you the past 8 years. Thank you for your dedication to Oregon agriculture, and I want you to know I enjoyed all of our robust conversations You will be missed.
Hey, Sharon and Pete. Happy trails. Gonna miss you guys. I promised Pete that if I get a chance to influence a decision to go to French Glen next year, we'll try and do it. And hopefully when we're east of the mountains, Sharon, you can come and sit in on a meeting and we'll get to see you again. Keep reading great books. Hope everybody stays healthy, gets through this pandemic, and life will be brighter at the end. We're gonna miss you guys. It's been a fun ride. Bye-bye.
Very nice, Carla. Thanks for putting that together. And thanks again, Pete and Sharon, both of you. It's been a pleasure serving with you. And I'm sure you'll miss us.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that video. That was really cool. And kind of brought back just how long it has been on the board. Some of the people that I served with that have been off the board for several years. Kind of amazing that 8 years went by that fast, really. But I truly enjoyed my service. You know, enjoyed every part of it, but mostly meeting all of you guys and getting to have the deep discussions that we did that were not necessarily at the board meetings, but when we were away from the board meetings. You know, I probably wouldn't have shared a car ride to Klamath with Stephanie and Barbara in any other life besides my Board of Ag life. So, you know, this has brought a whole new dimension to Pete Brentano, and I truly enjoyed every bit of it.
Sharon Livingston, thank you very much. Great presentation. Carla, you have been a real asset because I've not had the ability to do some of the things I needed to do technically, and you've provided, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And thank you to the rest of you. I do plan to be at the September meeting if possible. Sorry we couldn't do this one, but such is such, and we shall get by. And thank you again for the wonderful presentation. I've enjoyed it. Agriculture is my life and always will be. I'm still there. Thank you much. Goodbye.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, Alexis, is there anything else that we need to cover?
Not from me, just checking to Carla.
Just one thing with our September meeting dates, we still have September 22nd through the 24th on our schedule. So as we get a little bit closer and develop our agenda, we'll narrow down which day we will meet during that time period, but more to come on that. But we still are on track for those dates at this time.
Carla, this is Stephanie. It sounds like we're assuming it'll be virtual.
Most likely.
Very good. Any other business that the board members would like to discuss?
This is Barbara Boyer. Carla, great job on that video. I think you're setting a precedent. I think we should do it with everybody that goes off. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a quick study. I spent a day trying to figure out how to make a movie. So it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Very good. If there's no other business or comments, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.